My name is Presley Monroe, 33 years old, and my wedding anniversary night didn't end with roses or candlelight. It ended with the roar of a Mercedes engine leaving me behind at a deserted rest stop 37 miles outside Chicago. The sky had gone dark, the air thick with the scent of rain, and my husband said coldly, "You need a lesson. Walk home, Presley." What he didn't know was that in the pocket of my coat my phone was recording every word. Have you ever had the person you trusted most turn into a stranger that cruel? If it were you, what would you do, abandoned in the path of an approaching storm? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit like and follow the channel to stay with me through this story. Because that rainy night wasn't just betrayal. I used to think I knew exactly what I wanted. A stable job in the Loop, in the heart of Chicago's financial district, where I managed tens of millions of dollars in investment portfolios for wealthy clients. Back then, I walked out of a glass tower in my deep blue suit, feeling like I was playing a grand chessboard. But when Rhett appeared with that conquering smile and promises of a perfect family, I closed the reports and chose warmth over ambition. I believed love and sacrifice meant building together. But the moment I stepped away from my job, I had unknowingly handed the keys to my life to someone else. At first, Rhett's reasoning sounded perfectly logical. He wanted to take care of the family's finances so I could focus on making our home feel like one. I agreed, thinking it was a sign of devotion. But soon the joint accounts began to disappear. He opened private ones, claiming it was for tax efficiency, to protect long-term family assets. I believed him, until I saw the withdrawals, regular ones, a few $1,000s at a time, never coming back. When I asked, Rhett simply smiled, placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't need to worry. I've got it all covered. Trust me." Those 3 words started as comfort. But over time they became commands. I began to feel like a dependent, unable to touch the very money I helped generate. And when I dared to ask more than once, his tone turned. Rhett said coolly, "Don't cross the line. I manage the money because you don't understand how complex it is." That line pierced deep. Me, the woman who once stood in boardrooms explaining European market trends, now being told she wasn't capable of understanding complex matters. Then came the breaking point. I found a psychological evaluation mailed from a doctor I'd never met. My name was attached to chilling phrases: emotionally unstable, paranoia tendencies, requires supervision. I trembled holding the page. At the bottom, a signature: Elaine, my mother-in-law. A stamp of judgment. I remembered her eyes when she handed me a glass of wine at the last family gathering. Too calm, too confident. She had her script ready, just waiting for Rhett's nod. They planned to brand me incompetent and seize guardianship of all assets. But deep down I knew I wasn't a puppet. My adoptive father, who raised me from age 6, taught me to play piano, taught me that every note had its place and no one could take it away. His old upright still stayed in the living room. I'd often lifted its lid, fingers brushing the yellowed keys. One evening, torn apart by the forged documents, I lifted that lid again. Inside, a worn Polaroid was taped underneath the wood. It had likely sat there for decades. Scrawled along the bottom, ink smudged, "Your birth name is the key." I stared at the words, heart pounding as if hearing a familiar song return. My father, who rarely wrote anything long, had left this message. But why mention my birth name? That night, I sat alone in the dim living room, golden light falling onto the piano. I recalled the few times my father spoke of my roots, of bringing me home. I had never thought much about it. But that sentence changed everything. Was there a secret buried in my original documents? Had he seen something coming? Something I was only now beginning to understand? While I was deep in thought, Rhett walked in. He looked at me sitting by the piano holding the photo. "Digging into the past again?" he snapped. "Some things are better left alone." I clutched the picture, slipping it into my pocket. "It's from my father. You don't get to tell me what memories I'm allowed to keep." Rhett scoffed, stepping closer. "Eye level now. You think memories will save you? Don't forget, in the eyes of the law you're unstable. One document and you lose everything." He walked off and the room folded into a new heavy quiet. But that moment lit a fire in me. The woman who once said, "I've got it all covered," was gone. I had to uncover the truth about that name and why my father left such a cryptic message. Most of all, I needed to prove, to the world and to myself, that I was completely sane, fully capable of owning my life. In the days that followed, I quietly pieced together small fragments. The missing funds, the fake evaluation, the tightening control from Rhett and Elaine. All of it, disjointed notes. But I believed that, assembled together, they would form a complete composition. And I would be the one to play it, not them. Morton's Steakhouse in River North used to be our place for special occasions. That night, golden lights shimmered on polished wooden tables. Bottles of wine lined the glass shelves. Silverware gently clicked against grilled ribeye. I wore a simple black dress, hair pinned up, trying to set the tone of celebration. But deep inside, everything had changed. As the waiter stepped away, I looked straight at Rhett. Where did the $10,000 in our joint account go? His wine glass froze midair, then he set it down, eyes sharp as blades. Presley. I'm disappointed. Snooping behind my back again. Kept my tone steady. It's a joint account. I have a right to know. He gave a thin smile, slicing into his steak like I had said something trivial. A right to know? Have you forgotten who runs Whitaker Ridge Capital? You live in that house, drive that car, enjoy everything built by my hands, and you're questioning me over a few numbers. In that moment I saw it. The anniversary dinner was a setup, a stage for his final act in this lesson. I placed my utensils down, lifted my head. Rhett, you don't get to turn our money into your game. His eyes flashed with fury. He leaned back, arms folded, voice chilled. Yes. It's time you relearn your boundaries. That calm, venomous line was the beginning of that stormy night. But I wasn't that naive woman anymore. 6 months earlier, when I first noticed the account draining mysteriously, I contacted Harper Quinn, a financial abuse attorney. Tall, with soft brown waves and razor-sharp eyes, Harper saw through the lies. At our first meeting in her small West Loop office, she said bluntly, "Presley, this isn't just about marriage. This is a pattern of control. If your description's accurate, he's preparing to take everything in the divorce." I remember my hand trembling around the coffee cup. Harper pulled the papers toward her, firm and focused. "We need 3 things: financial proof, behavioral evidence of control, and an exit plan. Are you ready to walk the whole road?" That's when Lucia Park joined the team. A Korean-American forensic accountant, petite but razor-smart. She spent nights combing through statements and transactions, weaving it all into a web diagram. After 2 months, Lucia pointed at a faint line on her laptop screen. "Here. Rhett used a shell company in Delaware to cycle the money. Fake consulting invoices. The final recipient? A jewelry store in New York." I swallowed hard, remembering the new earrings on his assistant. Meanwhile, Noah, my neighbor a few houses down, helped build a remote backup system. A former cybersecurity engineer, Noah still felt indebted after I helped his wife sort a tricky medical loan. One evening he brought over an old laptop, plugged into my router and explained, "From now on, every camera in your house will back up to the cloud, but not to any account Rhett controls. He may think he's deleting them, but the originals stay here." Miguel Alvarez, a retired postal inspector, was another piece of the puzzle. He had handled many mail-based signature fraud cases. Quietly, he started collecting every parcel Rhett sent out, especially those small brown boxes headed to that Delaware company address. Each time, Miguel kept invoice copies and photographed the recipient's signatures. Each piece was falling into place, but I knew I needed one final lever, an undeniable act of behavioral proof. That anniversary night, when Rhett tilted his head at me with that half-smile, I knew the moment had come. He paid for dinner using the company card, signed with flair, then grabbed my hand and led me to the car. On the highway, he was silent, fingers tapping a rhythm on the steering wheel. I stared out the window. Streetlights passed like mile markers for the time I had wasted on him. When the car turned down a quiet road, I activated the recording app. My phone lit up in my bag and I heard his voice. "You crossed the line. You'll remember tonight." The Mercedes rolled past an abandoned rest stop. A rusted sign swayed in the wind. Rhett slowed down, parked, engine still running. Without even looking at me, he said, "Get out. You need to walk home and learn some respect." 37 miles. I turned toward him, heart pounding, face calm. "You really think this will scare me?" His jaw clenched, a smirk tugged at his lips. "You'll know your place after tonight." I opened the door. The leather creaked. Cold wind lashed my face. As my foot touched the cracked asphalt, I felt like I was stepping out of the role I had been forced into. The role of the controlled wife. Rhett stayed in the car, eyes glued to his phone. Probably texting someone. It's done. He had no idea his every word had been captured. Every move had fallen into the trap I'd prepared. I held myself tall and watched the car pull away, red taillights fading into the misty rain. In my mind, I started counting down. 60 seconds. 1, 2, 3. When the lights vanished around the bend, I turned and walked toward the abandoned gas station. The rusted sign above squeaked. And behind a crumbling wall, yellow light spilled from a familiar pickup truck. Noah was already there. He stepped out, rain jacket pulled tight, holding a dashcam still recording. "Did we get enough?" he asked quietly. I pulled out my phone, stopped the recording, voice firm, every word. "Then it's begun." As the rain thickened, I gripped my bag, knowing that the moment I stepped out of that car, the game no longer belonged to Rhett. The rain poured heavier as I stepped into the small hotel lobby in Lincoln Park. The wall clock showed nearly 11 p.m., the hallway silent, the air filled with old wood and floor cleaner. I handed the ID card with my maiden name, Presley Harrison, to the front desk clerk. The young woman looked at me, concern in her eyes at my drenched hair and rain-soaked coat. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, placing a towel in front of me and sliding over the incident log. My hand trembled as I signed. Harper had instructed clearly, "Make sure they document that you arrived abandoned. That's critical evidence." The clerk carefully noted in the ledger, "Guest arrived at 10:47 p.m. soaked from rain, stated she was left on the highway by her husband." I stared at the words, heart aching but steadier. Room 304 opened with a soft golden light, curtains drawn tight. I closed the door, slipped off my shoes, water trailing in thin lines across the floor. In that moment I exhaled. Rhett probably thought I was out stumbling along the highway or frantically calling a cab. But in truth I had entered phase 2 of the plan. I unlocked my phone. The screen lit up with over 10 missed calls from Rhett. His last message was short, "You'll remember tonight. Don't test me again." I powered off the phone and set it aside. Within 10 minutes, my email lit up with notifications. I opened my laptop and logged into a private account Rhett didn't know existed. There it was, a forwarded family-wide email from Elaine. My hands shook as I read each line. "Presley is in a severe emotional crisis. Tonight, she fled the home in a panic, leaving her husband and family deeply concerned. Please don't worry, we have a plan in place to protect her. I've attached a psychological evaluation from a specialist, confirming that urgent guardianship is necessary. We hope for your support." Attached was a PDF file titled, "Psychological Evaluation, Presley Monroe." I clicked it. Cold words filled the screen. Chronic anxiety, emotional instability, paranoia, poor self-management. Below was the signature of a doctor I had never met. I gripped the edge of the desk, my chest tightening as if crushed. Elaine wasn't attacking my credibility. She was fabricating a legal case to strip away my autonomy. If this plan succeeded, all Rhett had to do was submit it to court. They could file for legal guardianship and every asset, even what belonged solely to me, would end up in their hands. I took a deep breath and called Dr. Patel, my longtime family physician. He answered quickly, voice warm and familiar. "Presley? It's late. What's going on?" "Doctor, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I need urgent confirmation. Have you ever conducted any psychological assessment on me?" There was a pause, then his voice turned firm. "Never. I know your condition well. I've never diagnosed anything beyond occasional stress from work. What's happening?" I bit my lip and briefly explained Elaine's fabricated report. He exhaled sharply, his voice indignant. "That's serious fraud. Presley, I'll draft a formal letter immediately, stamped with my medical seal. And if necessary, I'm willing to testify in court that no such evaluation ever existed." Tears burned down my cheeks. I whispered, "Thank you. I really need that." I hung up, leaning back in the chair, feeling my fear turning into resolve. Elaine thought I would spiral, that I'd curl into a dark corner like a cornered animal. But in truth, every fake email, every forged document was another brick in the wall I was building, against them. Outside, rain drummed against the awning like fate's cold applause. I opened my notebook and began recording everything. The time I entered the hotel, the front desk clerk's words, Elaine's email, Dr. Patel's confirmation. Harper had said, "We need a continuous chain of evidence. The more detailed you are, the harder they'll be able to twist it." My phone buzzed again. Another message from Rhett. "If you keep playing games, don't blame me when the court turns on you. You know what my mother can do." I stared at the words, a chill running through me. Then calmly I opened my notes app, saved the message and sent copies to Harper and Lucia. Within minutes both responded. "Harper, keep logging everything. This is intimidation evidence." Lucia included a new financial chart with the note. "Found 2 more transfers to Cayman this morning. They're moving money." I listened to the rain outside the window, heart aching and steady. I knew I had passed the point of no return. And for that very reason, I had to see this through to the end. Lucia arrived on a morning drizzled with light rain, carrying 2 suitcases stuffed with paperwork. The small hotel room I'd been hiding in suddenly became a makeshift investigation office. She spread the files across the table. Bank statements, fake consultant invoices, tax forms. The yellow lamp above cast a tense glow over the documents, thickening the air with urgency. Wearing glasses, Lucia marked line after line with a red pen. Her voice was calm but razor-sharp. "Presley, look at this. Over the past 2 years, all the money from Elaine's charity fund followed the same pattern. Step 1. The fund pays a series of fake consulting companies. Step 2. The money moves to an intermediary account. Step 3. It gets laundered and pushed straight into offshore accounts in the Caymans." I stared at the dancing numbers, arrows forming a trail. They weren't just hiding money within the family. Elaine had turned a charity created to help the community into a massive funnel for money laundering. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Lucia slammed the stack of papers down. "I've matched transaction timestamps, SWIFT codes, even the IP addresses of the users. They all point to Rhett and Elaine. There's no doubt anymore." I feeling the ground shift beneath me. The truth didn't shock me anymore. It clarified me. It didn't break me, it sharpened me. The next day Miguel arrived with his worn leather case. He sat down and pulled out a neatly clipped folder. "Presley, I reviewed the power of attorney for the lake house in Wisconsin. On the surface it looks flawless, but..." He pulled out a magnifying glass and placed it over the signature that bore my name. "This isn't a live signature. It's a scanned image inserted using laser printing. See here, where the pen stroke ends, the ink pools unnaturally. Only a trained eye would catch it." I stared at my name, brazenly forged. That lake house wasn't property. It was where I spent summers with my adoptive father, where he taught me to read my first sheet of music. The thought that Rhett and Elaine tried to sell it behind my back crushed my chest. "What if they submit this to court?" I asked. Miguel nodded. "Then this forensic analysis will save you. Courts won't accept forged signatures when comparison results are this clear. Don't worry, I'll testify." He placed his rough hand on my shoulder, a light touch but firm. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Noah showed up that night. He brought his laptop, eyes smiling behind his glasses. "I just recovered the iTunes backup from Rhett's work phone. Since you legally own it, this is entirely legitimate." He turned the screen toward me. Dozens of notes appeared. I skimmed each line. Amidst meetings and investment lists, there was a separate folder titled Project Lantern. Noah opened it. The bullet points hit like blades. Gradually increase sedative dosage, record reactions. Log short-term memory loss, staged. Create records of Presley's instability, store in psych profile. Goal, obtain full guardianship and asset control. This was the blueprint. Rhett was building a legal case to render me incapacitated, turning every doubt I had into evidence against me. Noah gritted his teeth. Presley, he planned every step. But now he's exposed himself. I nodded, eyes blazing. Back everything up. We need to prove in court that I'm not paranoid. He's the one calculating every move. Noah inserted a USB, fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen flashed. Backup complete. He handed it to me and said plainly, "Guard it like your life depends on it." That night, I reopened the old Polaroid from the piano. Under the desk lamp, the tiny dust particles on the photo seemed unusual. I brought it to a small photo shop in Old Town where Mr. Harris, the elderly owner, still kept vintage enlarging equipment. He wore white gloves inspecting the Polaroid under a microscope. After a while he looked up, eyes bright. "Do you know what this is?" "There's a microdot hidden in the emulsion layer." A microdot, spy tech from wartime, compressing an entire document into something smaller than a grain of sand. "Can you enlarge it?" I whispered. He placed the photo under a special reader. Slowly, a sequence of characters emerged, shaky but legible. Harrison Trust, First National Bank, Box 117. My adoptive father had left a message, hidden for years in that photo beneath the piano lid. It wasn't random that he wrote, "Your birth name is the key." It all tied back to the Harrison Trust, a secret fund under my original name. I left the photo shop, the Polaroid sealed in a moisture-proof envelope. Rain still fell, but I didn't feel cold. From the laundered money to the forged signatures to Project Lantern and now the microdot, the evidence was forming a complete picture. A picture Rhett and Elaine never imagined I could expose. On the ride back, I clutched the envelope, listening to the rain tap the taxi window. In the dark, I whispered, "You saw this coming, Dad. Now it's my turn to uncover the full truth." The official notice that Elaine had filed for emergency guardianship reached me on a foggy Chicago morning. Harper called, her voice tense but steady in that familiar way. "Presley," she made her next move. "Emergency filing submitted to Cook County Court. They're labeling you unstable, a danger to yourself, requiring legal guardianship." I sat in silence, fingers tightening around my coffee, hearing my heartbeat thump. I had prepared for this possibility, but when it actually happened it still left me breathless. "Which judge got the case?" I asked. "Initially Judge Keating. But he just recused himself." Harper paused, voice heavier. "His wife is on the board of Elaine's charity foundation." I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Elaine's world was tight, a web of power closing in. If I hadn't had Harper, I might have been swallowed whole by that network. Harper continued, "The good news is we have evidence. I've received Dr. Patel's signed confirmation that no psychological assessment ever existed. And look at this." She forwarded a chain of leaked internal emails from Elaine's former assistant. In it, Elaine wrote, "We need to lock Presley out of the assets as soon as possible. Her mental condition will be the legal key." I read every word, rage burning through me. Elaine no longer hid her intentions. Every sentence was a knife, but also undeniable proof. I decided to leave Chicago for a few days. I drove to Wisconsin to see Aunt June, my adoptive father's sister. She was in her 70s, living in a small wooden house on the edge of Madison. The drive wound through birch trees turning golden. Fallen leaves rustled under my tires, and for the first time in weeks my chest eased. Aunt June opened the door, white hair in a high bun, eyes sharp but kind. "Presley, your father must have sensed this long ago. He left this for you." She handed me a small key wrapped in an old cloth. Etched faintly on it, First National Bank, Box 117. My heart skipped. The very detail I'd seen in the microdot. We drove to the town's main bank. The manager, Mr. Polson, remembered my father instantly. When he saw the key, he nodded solemnly and led us to the basement. Fluorescent light glowed over rows of metal boxes. Box 117 opened with a dry click. Inside, a thick envelope and a sealed document pack in waterproof plastic. I opened the envelope first. It was my real birth certificate. My name wasn't Presley Monroe. It was Presley Harrison, the surname of my adoptive father. Hands shaking, I opened the documents. Bold letters read, "Harrison Trust Agreement." I flipped through the pages and stopped at a special clause. In the event the beneficiary faces attempts to remove her self-management, the trust shall activate automatically, transferring all rights and assets to the beneficiary under her birth name. It was clear. My father had foreseen the danger and created this trust to protect me. Elaine must have known about it too, which is why she scrambled to frame me under guardianship. If the court declared me incompetent, she'd gain legal access to the trust. "He left you a fortress, Presley," Aunt June said, her hand trembling on my shoulder. "But a fortress only matters if you know how to stand inside it." 4 years under Rhett's control, I had forgotten I was once strong, once fully independent. My father had seen everything ahead, and he left me the weapon I needed. That night, I sat in Aunt June's cozy living room, trust documents spread across the wooden table, yellow light glowing. Harper called via video. When I held up the birth certificate and trust, she exhaled in relief. Presley, this is the bomb. This clause nullifies everything Elaine's trying to do. In fact, it turns her entire plan into evidence, proof of intent to seize. But they won't back off easily, I said quietly. Which is exactly why you need to stay quiet. Tell no one outside our team. Let them think they're winning. And when we go to court, that is when the blow will land. Lucia cut in, her face appearing on the screen beside Harper's. I'll keep tracking the fund's money flow. Elaine's definitely rushing to move what's left. We need to catch it in real time. I quietly folded the birth certificate and placed it back into the plastic sleeve. Inside me was a mix of deep betrayal and a strange rising fire. I had stopped being the wife left stranded in the rain. I was the only one who could protect the legacy my father left behind, and maybe the only one holding enough proof to stop Elaine and Rhett. Aunt June poured me a cup of hot tea, sat beside me and gently clasped my hand. Sweetheart, your father used to say, when the time comes she'll realize she's stronger than she thinks. Maybe this is that moment. That night, the Art Institute of Chicago wore its usual grandeur. White stone pillars, sweeping stairs lined with pale red carpet, and a long row of luxury cars parked in front. The air was crisp, a light breeze stirred the hems of elegant gowns and golden lights shimmered on the glass, making the scene feel like a perfectly designed dream. I walked through the tall glass doors in a simple square-neck black gown, neat but bold enough to stand out. Lucia, Harper, and Miguel had arrived earlier, each with a specific role. I knew tonight wasn't about fundraising as the invitation claimed. It was the endgame to a chess match that had gone on far too long. Rhett stayed near the stage, champagne glass in hand, face gleaming under the lights, his smugness unchanged. He wore a dove-gray tuxedo, standing tall as if he'd never left anyone behind on a roadside, never plotted to take guardianship and seize a trust he didn't even know existed. From the back of the room, I spotted Elaine in a deep wine-colored gown with a high neckline, her white fur shawl sweeping lightly across the marble. She smiled at donors, at a state senator, at a hospital director, like the image of a benevolent matriarch. Her personal assistant whispered something into her ear. She gave a small nod, calm and measured. Just as I was about to move closer to Lucia, a hand gently tapped my elbow. Presley. I turned. It was Naomi. She wore a dark suit, subtle makeup, her hair tied low, far from the charming assistant once seated beside Rhett in investor meetings. Her expression was serious, voice low. Come with me. Just 1 minute. We stepped into a quiet corridor, wall sconces casting slanted light on the stone walls. Naomi looked at me briefly, then said softly, I'm an undercover agent with the Department of Justice. My real name is Naomi Lin. Tonight's the takedown. They don't know how long I've been embedded. All the times Naomi disappeared, the vague reports I once questioned, it was all because she worked for the government. Naomi continued, the target isn't Rhett. It's Elaine. She's been running the largest benevolence washing operation in the Midwest. The charity's just the surface. Underneath, millions of dollars have been funneled through shell companies offshore, disguised as educational and health initiatives. Tonight's evidence will break it open. And me? What am I in all this? You're the only one who had the courage to stop them from the inside. And you're the reason we hit the timing perfectly. Naomi gave my hand a quick squeeze, then walked away. When I returned to the main hall, Rhett had already taken the stage. He held the microphone, voice warm, gaze sweeping confidently across the crowded room. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to say a few words about the importance of financial ethics in philanthropy. We live in a world where trust in charitable funds and transparency is the very foundation of lasting change. I held my place in the last row, eyes fixed on him. And I believe that if each of us remains committed to honesty, every dollar can create real transformation. The moment he finished, the main lights dimmed. The projector screen behind the stage lit up. Without warning, numbers appeared on screen. Money flow diagrams, account charts, summaries of suspicious transactions. Lucia stood by the control station, hands moving quickly. She spoke into the microphone. Apologies for the interruption. But everyone here deserves to know exactly where their money has gone. The room fell silent. This is the money trail from the Future Bridges Foundation founded by Mrs. Elaine Whitaker. In the last 18 months, 68% of donations didn't go to community programs as publicly claimed. They were rerouted through a company called Northline Strategies LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware. From there, the money continued into accounts held by Mr. Rhett Whitaker, my husband. Whispers rippled through the audience. Some pulled out their phones to record. Rhett froze on stage. From the back, Miguel stepped forward with a black case. He opened it and pulled out a set of documents with official seals. This is a signature verification report from USPS and the Judicial Board. The power of attorney used to sell real estate in Wisconsin under the name Presley Monroe is fake. The signature was copied, scanned, and reprinted using laser technology. Elaine shot up from her chair, face pale. She reached into her purse for her phone. But before she could dial, Naomi stepped into the center of the hall, voice firm and clear. Elaine Whitaker, I am Special Agent Naomi Lynn, United States Department of Justice. You are under investigation for financial fraud, interstate money laundering, and tax evasion. Naomi pulled an official badge from her pocket and held it up for everyone to see. You are welcome to record this moment. But please remain orderly. Elaine tried to run, but two federal agents approached from both sides and stopped her. Rhett jumped off stage attempting to slip out the side door, but it had already been locked by the control system. Media cameras, already present for the gala, turned directly toward the chaos. A local news reporter stood up, microphone ready. This is breaking news tonight. The Whitaker family, once honored for their charitable efforts, is now under investigation for laundering and misappropriation of donations. Flashes went off, shutters clicked, murmurs spread, but I only looked at Elaine, the woman who tried to take everything from me. She was now in handcuffs, shouting something no one could quite hear. Rhett lingered beside her, face ashen, eyes wide with panic, like a man realizing everything he thought he controlled had collapsed under the weight of justice. Under the dim lights of the third-floor interrogation room, I sat across from Naomi, the woman who had once been a shadow at the edge of my life story. Now she placed her federal badge on the table, the silver emblem gleaming cold, and her voice was calm but steady. Project Lantern was a covert operation that spanned 13 years. We were tracking a money laundering network disguised as charitable work. Elaine Whitaker's foundation was only the surface. But you... She paused, looking at me with a softened gaze. You were the factor that made it impossible to keep hiding. It was the activation clause in the trust under your birth name that forced the family to expose their entire financial system. From there, we traced shell companies, Cayman accounts, and a network of so-called financial advisors preying on elderly widows. I was silent, not from surprise, but from the feeling that someone had just opened a door I always thought was solid wall. You weren't the target, Naomi added. But you were the one who locked the final gate and helped us shut the whole network down. 3 days later, Rhett's attorney sent me a private resolution offer. They wanted to settle outside of court, avoid the media, in exchange for me signing a waiver dropping criminal charges against Rhett and Elaine, and agreeing not to speak publicly about the case. I didn't respond right away. That morning, I sat in the public library, where elderly patrons came to research retirement documents and healthcare benefits. I opened an old newspaper with a photo of Elaine cutting the ribbon at the launch of Harmony for Hope. The headline read, "A woman changing the lives of lonely seniors." I folded the paper and went to see my attorney. I don't agree. My priority isn't private revenge. It's protecting those who were misled. My lawyer looked at me silently. After a few seconds, he nodded. 1 week later, federal authorities held a press conference announcing the case. Rhett sent me a carefully worded apology, full of phrases like deep regret, under manipulation, seeking forgiveness. I refused to stand beside him and read it to the press. Instead, I visited a senior home on the outskirts of Waukegan, where 5 elderly women had once been invited to invest in a community development fund run by Elaine. One of them, Clarice, held my hand tightly. "You're the first one to come back and ask what we actually need. No one ever asked that before." I sat with them not to talk about the past. We talked about the present. the wellness classes they wanted to start, the unused land behind the center, and a community garden that could rise from the very dollars once stolen. In that little room, sunlight pouring through the window, I refused to see myself as a victim. Forgiveness from Rhett or Elaine meant nothing to me. They built a cage around me with lies. And I broke it with the truth. Now I was free to choose how to move forward. Cook County Court officially recognized me as the rightful beneficiary of the trust my adoptive father left behind, under my restored birth name. The certificate arrived by certified mail, thick and heavy in hand, but to me it felt light as air. Not because of the money inside, but because for the first time, my identity was truly honored, not buried beneath the mask of Presley Monroe that Elaine had forced on me for years. I didn't use that money to buy a lake house or a yacht. I used it to build a network. Something I wished I'd had when I was trapped beneath all the glamorous lights and financial manipulation. I called it the Blue Lantern Network. The name began with an image, the blue lantern that hung on Aunt June's porch every night. It was a signal that said, someone here is ready to listen. We started with a small office in Milwaukee. I rented the old space of a shuttered bookstore. The attic became a records archive and the ground floor was converted into a multipurpose space. Naomi helped me register the nonprofit while Lucia, with her expertise in tracing money flow, became the lead coordinator of the financial forensics lab. She mapped everything out, covering the walls with diagrams and posts. It's like she was rebuilding a puzzle. Investments, email threads, forged contracts. Noah, a digital security specialist who had once worked with a federal agency, took charge of cybersecurity and coordinated the Safe Exit team, a group dedicated to helping victims who were being watched, threatened, or needed to pull money and escape joint accounts. He didn't talk much, but he always arrived on time and never left the office if someone still needed help. Miguel returned from New Mexico bringing a suitcase full of training material, how to archive emails, take screenshots that would hold up in court, preserve metadata. He said, "The truth can be distorted if you don't preserve the evidence correctly." I held small Saturday morning classes for seniors, just to teach them how to read bank statements, spot fake emails, and recognize the signs when someone tries to use financial jargon as a weapon. One drizzly morning, Clarice came back with a sealed envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a card from Elaine offering an unconditional financial partnership, along with a blank sheet of paper that already had Clarice's signature at the bottom. We used a signature scanner to examine the pen pressure and discovered that the top section had been written in UV ink. A subtle manipulation Lucia spotted instantly. "She calls it charity," Clarice whispered. "But what she really wants is your trust so she can turn it into power." Meanwhile, the case officially went to trial. Rhett received a federal sentence for conspiracy to launder money and financial fraud. The evidence included footage from the gala at the Art Institute, along with testimony from Miguel and Naomi. Rhett initially tried to blame it on pressure from his mother, but internal meeting transcripts and accounts in his name tore that defense apart. Elaine faced more serious charges. Naomi testified before a federal grand jury, revealing that Elaine had established dozens of shell companies across 8 states, siphoning more than $100 million from charitable foundations. Each company carried a kind name: Healing Path, Horizon Light, Grace Bloom. But behind the names was a sophisticated network. Money moved in circles, reinvested through private shares, then used to purchase luxury properties, fund high-profile events, or hide in offshore accounts. When Naomi pinned the map of states to the wall and marked each with red pushpins, I didn't see a crime map. I saw communities left behind, people ruined for trusting goodness in a sealed envelope. And I knew then Blue Lantern wasn't just a reaction. It was a light in the places no one was supposed to see. I moved to Lincoln Park on a lightly rainy afternoon. The brownstone wasn't large or fancy, but it had a window that looked out to an old oak tree across the street and a porch wide enough to sit and sip tea when the seasons changed. The movers helped place my adoptive father's upright piano in the corner of the living room. I sat down, opened the lid, and ran my fingers across the worn wood. Inside, I placed the once sliced Polaroid of me and him, now taped back together in full. It was no longer evidence, it was a thank you. Thank you for leaving the key at the exact moment I needed it most. And thank you for believing I would find my way home on my own. I also hung a small blue lantern on the porch. A simple object, but to me it stood for something much greater. A safe place. Not just for me, but for anyone who'd ever been treated like a burden in their own home. That lantern was lit for the first time on a breezy evening. I was making tea when I heard a knock at the door. A woman stood at the bottom of the steps, holding a plastic bag with a few personal belongings. She didn't say much, just handed me a card that read, "Lucia sent me. She said this is a place that helps." I invited her in, fetched an extra blanket and made a small bowl of soup. No one asked names. Sometimes what a person needs most is a place where silence is allowed to be kind. Gradually, the house became known as the meeting point between the Blue Lantern Network and reality. Survivors who had lost everything to forged signatures started reclaiming their dignity. Some had worked in banks, others were grandmothers who never learned to read, but they all carried the same question. Why didn't anyone stop this sooner? There's no simple answer. But every kitchen table conversation, every Saturday statement reading class, is part of a reply. I still remember an elderly man who knocked in the first week of March. He carried an old tin box filled with invoices, investment certificates, and a handwritten letter from Elaine, the one she sent when she launched the End-of-Life Care Fund in Milwaukee. He didn't blame anyone. He simply asked, "Do you think I can still get my dignity back?" I made no promises. I offered him peppermint tea and called Miguel to collect the documents properly. Dignity isn't measured in dollars. But knowing your worth is always the beginning. Naomi stopped by in the spring, no longer wearing her agent's badge but carrying a tray of muffins and case updates. The Project Lantern campaign had led to more than 10 federal arrests in 6 months. She told me about a couple in Arizona forced to mortgage their home for a medical philanthropy fund, which turned out to be one of Rhett's shell companies. They've since gotten their home back, partly thanks to Noah's team decoding the financial data. I listened, took notes, then pinned up a crayon drawing from a 6-year-old grandchild of one of the victims, who had nearly taken her life after losing every cent of her retirement. The child had drawn a house with a glowing blue lantern and a brown-haired woman smiling through a window. I didn't ask if that was supposed to be me. I didn't need to, because I knew exactly what I was building. Not a rescue center. Not restitution. But a place where those who had been deceived, erased, pushed out of their own family's seats, could sit down without needing to explain why they exist. I sat in the small room, the afternoon light shining on the upright piano. The keys were worn with time, but each still carried sound. I tapped a few notes. Not beautiful, but enough to bring back the memory of afternoons when he taught me music theory with a spoon and a ceramic mug. I thought of Elaine's words from an old recording. Someone like her is just a blemish on the family tree. Maybe she was right in some way. I didn't continue their legacy. I wasn't trying to look the part of a Monroe. I wasn't anyone's extension, nor was I the shadow in someone else's script. I am now simply myself, with the correct name on my birth certificate, with choices that are mine alone, and with a blue lantern quietly lit each night on the front porch as a silent signal that, here you don't have to choose between survival and silence. Here your presence is honored. I don't need Rhett or Elaine to fall for me to feel peace. I only need the truth, to be named correctly, and boundaries, not to divide but to preserve what matters. Each of us has a limit. Maybe you've kept quiet to keep the peace. Maybe you've bent because it felt like the only way to be accepted. But one day you'll realize that true peace doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from standing for the truth and for yourself. And what about you? Have you ever had to choose between silence and justice? Between family and your self-worth? Share your thoughts below. I treasure every honest story you send. And if you'd like to continue journeying through these emotional stories of family, trust, and how we each rewrite our lives, follow the channel. Every story opens a new door. I hope to see you in the next episode.